welcome everyone to a special episode of Podcast of the Fallen. We are here with our second ever guest on the podcast today, half of Smiley's podcast, the Malazan Encyclopedia himself. We have
Oh,
Lee here with us.
hello. So Mora couldn't make it because festival on the entire week is basically full of festivities. So her night's a bit busy. So I'm here instead. Happy to be here. We've met with Nathan once more over on Smiley's, and it's my first time here. I don't usually go as a guest on other podcasts, so I'm like once over on Derek's, and they're very nice over there. So yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Yeah, definitely. If you haven't, go check out Smiley's podcast. They have been covering, I think you've covered all of the novels of the Malazan
Yeah.
Empire, and you're currently covering the Kharkanas trilogy, which
Yep.
I think you might be like the first podcast to cover
Yep.
those books.
As far as I
So,
know, yes.
and then if you have finished the series, I have an episode on their podcast where we talked about our favorite characters in each book. So
And
that
Nathan
was super
somehow
fun.
stole all of mine. So yeah.
Well, you didn't have to let me go first on
I
every book,
didn't.
but
I decided to be courteous and I paid for it. But
but
anyway,
just
yeah.
to start off, on the I was scrolling Facebook this morning before I got on, and on the Malazan Empire group on Facebook, I guess Steven Erickson is attending a convention or like being on a panel at a thing in Barcelona today. And in the meeting, he said that he is in talks with a company to make a TV series and that he couldn't say anything more. So it doesn't necessarily mean Malazan, but I don't see anything else that it
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah,
So that's just kind of exciting. And the mod chat, the Malazan
Yeah.
Reddit mod chat has been popping off since that dropped. So
that's pretty exciting though. Either way, I think it's gonna be really good because I mean, so
Yeah, I
far
hope
what
so.
I've read, I think he's gonna do great no matter what he makes.
fingers crossed. But I think what we wanted to start out with, Lee, is what
Mhm.
we've done with all one of our guests so far is just kind of ask about your Malazan journey, how you found the
Right.
series, and then maybe how your podcast with Mora got started.
Right. So incidentally, this is topical. The first time I got into Malazan was via a random recommendation from a friend with which we were trading stories from Dungeons and Dragons. And they wanted to run a one shot, which was essentially based without necessarily letting anyone know, because I didn't know, and his players hadn't known about Malazan either. And he wanted to make a one shot, basically like 2 or 3 sessions based on the Chain of Dogs, and completely without knowing what that was. I googled Malazan. I from the cover because it's like Moonspawn above Pale. I figured, hey, this looks sci-fi enough. I figured, like how are we going to D&D-fy this without me knowing very much and what little he shared. The gist was, refugee train, walking through a desert, fighting off an enemy army, which eventually just went off the rails to more fantastical elements. But the core point was he was having trouble figuring out how to make an encounter, and yours truly, with no idea what he was talking about, just mentioned, "Hey, maybe you should make us like the party be a sapper group that blows up a bridge," because we were in talks about that with what little details I knew. And like 3 or 4 months later, it was a summer, 2 years ago, 2021. A couple more friends which I knew and held in high esteem recommended Malazan. I'm like, oh, why not? I have a few days, I can pick that up. I found Gardens. I read it in about 4 days, and the rest is history. Smiley's began over a year ago. I'm feeling old now. Because Mora and I had known for each other about a few months by then, close to like 6 months. And a distant dream Mora had was to make a podcast, and a distant dream of mine was to make a sort of YouTube channel where I can just dump all my essays on, which came to be known about a year after that as Smiley's After Hours. And in effect, those two things conjoined when we figured out that Mora hadn't actually read the novels. She'd read everything else pretty much, but not the novels of Malazan Empire. So Mora at the time had already started the read along. We were doing the Malazan read along. I think we were finishing up Deadhouse Gates by the time we started. And so we did Night of Knives in August. It went shockingly well for how amateurish the whole thing was. And about a year later, with immense support from community, which we really did not expect, and I still don't believe it, to be honest. Here we are.
Awesome. Honestly, kind of sounds like a little bit like how our podcast got started. Like
Yeah.
you guys and 10 Very Big Books and D&J's Epic Quest and all the other YouTube channels and stuff had made me kind of want to start one. And so when Matt was going to
Mhm.
start the series, I just kind of texted him and said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And he said, "Sure."
Yeah, why not? I'll be able to think a little more critically about the books,
Yeah.
which I think was fun.
Yeah, it's been really
So
fun
yeah.
so far. So yeah, we're here today to talk about the I guess not the ending of Deadhouse Gates, but talk about Deadhouse Gates as kind of a whole. We kind of saved
Mhm.
our overall thoughts on the book. We saved that out of our last episode of the book yesterday so that we could kind of talk about it today and maybe also get your
Mhm.
perspective on it. So I don't know if Matt wanted to go first on that. What are your overall thoughts on Deadhouse Gates?
I really enjoyed the book. I think I said it a bunch of times, but like ever since the beginning, it like caught me off guard of just like, oh, this is different than Gardens of the Moon. This is a lot better in just terms of writing, like skill. I really enjoyed all of it. Like thinking back, reading through, I don't think there was really many parts where I felt like I was my time was wasted or the story felt like it had wasted spots. So I feel like overall, I really enjoyed it just because it was really cohesive. All the different narratives I thought played really well with each other. And then the ending, I think catches a lot of people off guard in multiple aspects, which it's weird to say, but thought it was well done. Like I enjoyed it, and just think it sets up like a bigger narrative down the road. But I really enjoyed a lot of the different story arcs exploring different themes, you know, Felison and Heberick and just their journey to becoming the leaders of a rebellion. And then you got Duerker going along this really depressing journey through basically just watching everyone get killed, but somehow saving the people, you know. And then it was really cool to see the Mappo Akarium storyline of just like their perspective on everything with being like basically immortals, just journeying through. It was kind of fun just to see that. But overall, I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was a lot of fun to read, and I'm excited to read more of the stories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
speaking of the ending, so we read up to the end of chapter 21, which is chapter 21 is the fall of Coltane. And
Yeah,
then
yeah. I know.
okay. And then you would know what chapter is which. And then we read the rest of the book where 10,000 soldiers get crucified. And I was like, okay, Matt, did you expect it to get worse? And
Not at all.
he did not. But I told him, like, there was that meme going around the other week of how often do you think about the Roman Empire? I think that the chain of dogs is my Roman Empire.
Yeah.
What was your favorite character in Deadhouse Gates, Matt?
It's a good question. I want to say I think I enjoyed Dealworker the most throughout the whole thing, just because he carried that amazing perspective of a historian and like a veteran soldier through the chain of dogs. And so, and that being kind of like the main focus in a lot of aspects of the this story, I felt like it was it was really cool just to see him and then just how he dealt and coped with a lot of the atrocities that kind of happened and then his perspective on all of it. So I really enjoyed his storyline, and I think he probably was my favorite. I mean, it's kind of tough to say because I really enjoyed a lot of the other characters. But I think Duerker definitely stuck out to be just the best because like as I like history a lot. And so just to see a historian's perspective on this and just like him imagining like thinking back to other wars and other events and like comparing them to this, I thought was really cool to see. And then just I mean at the very end, he finally got his frustrations out on the nobleman. That was really satisfying. And then he called out the Gistal dude and then like said, "Hey, your plan didn't really work, but it did." So I mean, I really liked kind of the fire he had as well against the enemies and rivals, and he kind of didn't back down, kind of stuck it to his course and stuck to his guns. So I really liked it.
I think Lee would agree with you because I think on our
For
episode
sure.
that we did,
For sure.
I think you picked Duiker as your favorite of Deadhouse Gates.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Duiker is such an interesting perspective, because you could very easily just frame it through List or Lol or some average like soldier in the seventh or the Wiccans. But instead, you have this outside perspective who knows how this is going to end, right? He's seen such things. He's a veteran soldier for however many years. He's a historian of virtually every campaign since the unifications. He knows where this is going. He's not
Yeah.
stupid. This is not possible normally. And then Colton starts winning, and he keeps winning. And then slowly, Duiker himself starts suspending his own disbelief. And by the time he reaches Aaron, or at least the road to Aaron, he's halfway to believing. You know, there's passages like, we haven't lost a single civilian in 48 hours. They're still somehow holding like 300 men versus a few thousand. And you've gone beyond his pragmatic, let's be real here, a realistic view of things that this is going to fail and we're all going to die, to transcending this view and sort of adapting the same view that most soldiers and especially most Wiccans have of Coltrane, of like this ascendant dude, this god among men who cannot be defeated. And this is, a lot of characters throughout the novel, especially interacting with Duiker, go through this, from the Tithanse in chapter 5 when he rides through and tries to find them, when they go to Hisar and he finds like the barracks are like barricaded and there's a whole ton of bodies outside the barracks, but like there's no Wiccan bodies there, so what gives? And then along the way, I don't know. I feel it's a very interesting and deliberate choice to frame the narrative like that. Compare that to like Ganos, who is very much in the fighting in Guardians of the Moon. He's there, he's doing his thing, but that introduces his own biases because he can't be as objective because he doesn't have the necessary information. But Duiker knows how this should play out, and the fact that it doesn't play out like this is a weird, startling thing to him. And so when he believes, you start to believe, and you keep on believing. And then when it finally strikes that, oh no, they're really not gonna make it, it gets bad. And they're like, but at least they're there. It's not gonna get worse, and then it gets worse. And then when Duiker gives up, we're like, oh fuck, well, this is done. We're done. I'm stopped reading. I don't want to read it anymore. Stupid book. I don't want to read this. Yeah. So Duiker's the man.
He really is. I mean, I'd say Bowden as well, but he lost track of him partway through the story.
Yeah, you should have. I have never seen anyone latch onto Bowden as much as Matt did, and it was mainly after the reveal of who Bowden was, and then Bowden's death that Matt was like, "Why did this guy have to go?"
Like, you don't have to reveal that cool information and then kill him. I was like, that was the most disappointing reveal that we don't get to learn anymore.
Right.
And then I think my favorite character this time, I will make a formal apology. On Smiley's podcast, I said my favorite character in Deadhouse Gates was Kalam, I think. I take that back because I didn't enjoy Kalam's storyline as much this book. Every time I got to Kalam, I felt like, oh, no, take me back to Fellison or Fiddler or Duiker. But what you were saying about Coltane, I think Coltane is my favorite in Deadhouse Gates now. And I think it's a really good choice by Erikson not to let us in his head. It leaves it leaves Duiker wondering, what is this guy thinking? It lets you kind of start to believe in that idea that he's a god among men. Because the whole time you're like, wait, Coltane planned another genius tactic that won them another impossible to win battle. Who is this guy? And then you get that reveal where he punches Gessler. Everyone's like, wait, Gessler? So Gessler's almost ascended. If Coltane can break his face, what does that mean about Coltane? And I love the building, and then I love the human moments that we get to see with Coltane, whether it's his short conversation with Duiker by the fire, or that one where he accidentally demotes the sapper, and he has no idea what to do, and he's barely holding back his laughter. It's like, oh, so this guy does know how to be like a human. He's just putting on for the army so that they don't give up. I think I finally fully understand why so many people latch onto Coltane, and he remains one of their favorite characters.
I think on that note, one of the most expressive, succinct quotes is like, Nether going, Coltane commands, and we obey. That's all. There's no more. There's not much more to it. He says do this, and we do this. We don't ask questions. We're not here to ask questions. We do it because it's Coltane. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, it's like
no words.
When Duiker's like, so you guys are the 7th? They're like, we're Coltane's army. Like, the Malazans start to identify as Coltane's men, which I thought was really cool and interesting to see.
Yeah, Coltane kind of achieves the same status as Dujek in that sense, because all of Dujek's men identify as, I am Dujek's soldier. I'm not a soldier of whatever army. I'm Dujek's. So, which you'll get to see more, Matt, of Dujek in the next book.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, we have to take a whole pause, but I mean, it's all right. We already took a pause.
Yeah, Matt decided to go on vacation.
Yeah. Yeah, Coltane, I think he was probably he was probably like close second or third favorite character in that whole story. He was so cool.
So I have to ask, where does Fellison rank after you finished the book?
Ah, well, she finally left behind her whiny ways. I feel like, as mean as that may be to say to someone that went through as much as she did, but she's pretty cool by the end. Like I really liked her progression towards accepting the mantle of being like the leader of the rebellion. I thought it was really cool and interesting. So I think she's definitely up there in the top like five of my favorite characters from the book. I haven't thought through it too clearly on who's like the other like in the top five besides Duiker and Coltane. So I'd have to give a little more thought to that. But she by the end, I'm like, okay, I really want to see where her storyline goes. I mean, as the leader of this insane bloodthirsty rebellion, like how's she gonna handle this, especially when her sister's the opponent. So I was like, this is I like this turn of events. It's kind of cool to see. I
Yeah,
don't know.
Matt's own character arc with Fellison has been interesting to watch because he started out full of sympathy, slowly started losing some as the book went on, to eventually, I think, was mainly just annoyed. And then Bowden dies, and he gets a little more sympathy, and then she becomes Shaik Reborn, and he's like, oh, this is interesting.
I'm like, hey, there we go. We finally added something to her besides I'm just rebelling against everyone that's trying to save me. We're just gonna die. I'm
Which
like, all right.
yeah, don't worry, Matt. I think that arc of how you feel about Fellison is pretty typical for first
Yeah,
time
yeah, I'd say
readers.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I was pretty happy to see that there's kind of like a termination of some of that attitude of hers towards hey, I'm the leader now. I'm gonna tell people things what's up. And I was like, all right, this is sweet. She's in charge now. Let's see where this goes.
No notes.
No nuts.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
just
oh, go ahead.
I know I'm just anything I say, I'm just imagining both of you like, oh, he doesn't know this, he doesn't know that.
No, no, no.
But
Yeah.
I just
No,
think it's so funny.
there's a tiny bit of that, but one thing that I really like about Book of the Fallen specifically is that each book is kind of self-contained.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty easy to talk about each book without having a super wealth of knowledge of what comes next.
Pretty cool.
Lee, how long has it been since you read Deadhouse Gates?
Well, I finished it along with the read along, so I'm gonna have to check
Oh, that's
really quick.
true.
One moment. I can't actually find it. So probably about like 7 or 8 months ago, I'd say. Probably. Something like that. But yeah, it wasn't too long ago. And I reached all the way up to the Crippled God. I've not started it yet, but I would say Deadhouse Gates and a reread is either top three or top four, somewhere up like. And as far as like the first five books are concerned, it's probably the first among them. So it's a really good book. No notes. It's a really good book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's also like one of the few books which I've kind of resolved. I am not going to read again if I can help it because chapter 21 and 22 are traumatizing, man. Like, just yeah, yeah, just I can't
Yeah.
put myself through that again. I can't. I'm sorry.
Oh, see, maybe I'm just a masochist, but I like putting myself through stuff like that. It chapter 21 didn't hit me as hard this time because I looked ahead and knew that it was coming, but my time before this reading it, which I guess for me was also about 8 or 9 months ago, I forgot that chapter 21 was the fall, and so it just hit me out of nowhere, and I was a mess.
Yeah.
But I think for me, Deadhouse Gates actually has been an interesting one for me because the first time I read it, I went, "Oh, that's a good book." I barely understood what the hell was happening at some points, but it was a good book, and I liked the ending. And then the second time I read it, I think I walked away from it going, "That is a perfect book."
Yeah.
And then the third time I read it, it fell a little further in my rankings, and now I think I'd actually rank it like fifth or sixth, while while still giving it like a 9 or a 9.5 out of 10.
Right.
It's number one of two for me. So I mean,
Yeah. To be fair, yeah.
that's my ranking so far.
Yeah. I think what has brought it down for me has been Kalam's storyline, which I still
Mhm.
enjoy. But Matt and I were talking in one of our episodes about how his whole little mini story on the ship just kind of feels like Erickson was like, well, Kalam's crossing an ocean while all these other characters are doing stuff on Seven Cities. I'm gonna give him something to do.
I was just thinking, I was like, yeah, I remember the boat. I was just like, some of the bits, I was like, there's a bit of a change of pace here. Like, this is very much like the side story of like maybe like the bonus episode in some season that the animators were like, we need just like one more episode to hit like the 20 we need for this season. Let's just throw this in here just to add a little fun. Because yeah, I thought it was cool though just to explore the life at sea though for a little bit. I thought that was kind of fun to see how Erickson tackled that. So for the most part, I enjoyed it. But yeah, it was a little strange to just be like, all right, and Kalam, he's just chilling on a boat for a little bit. Gonna fight some pirates.
Yes, I'll interject. So, speaking
Yeah.
of, I guess since we're here, so I generally try to find the silver lining in most things, which can be very annoying. Uh, so the reason I think, at least narratively, this is in the book, beyond we need to get Kalam from point A to point B, which is one reason, and the
Mhm.
most obvious one, I think is that, reasonably speaking, Kalam is a dead man walking right there, and the fact that he's alive hints at something because, I mean, Pearl stabbed the fuck out of him
Yeah.
when they actually reached port. He could have done that at any point because they lost track of time because he was permanently mockering everybody. So at any point he wished, Pearl could just paralyze Kalam, stab him in the spleen, throw him overboard. Kalam is dead. The fact that he didn't do this probably speaks more to both what the Empire's long hands, right? Because they could follow him from all the way where he left, where he landed in Erliton, through to his delivery of the book, and all the way from Aaron to Malaz City. They were permanently tracking him. Everyone, well, at least everyone that mattered, so Lassine and Doper, knew where Kalam was at any given time. The fact that he still managed to reach Malaz City and speak to Lassine is both a testament to Kalam's prowess as a character, because the guy's a brute and he is a really good fighter. And also, it hints at something more, maybe maybe, well, no, not maybe. Pearl really is that vain that he really does want Kalam to appreciate him and say, yeah, you know what, I could kill you, I would kill you, but it's you, and I want to see what you can do. Pearl is that kind of guy. Um, Everyone else, I'm less sure. So I think part of the reason for why this filler arc exists is beyond the fact that, yeah, I mean, I like when Kalam kills pirates. It looks cool. It sounds cool. And when like they threw the guy overboard with the
Yes.
sharks, that was cool. But at least narratively, I think it's a way to set up the fact that Kalam is way over his head. Like, way over his head. His justification is a bit flimsy. Like, he gets to the scene, she asks him, why are you doing this? Like, hang on, why am I doing this? Which is one thing. It's that for all their faults and for however poor, let's be fair here, the Claw's management of the whole rebellion was, because Kalam constantly thinks, like, throughout, like, Kalam would have just nipped this in the bud, killed 10 people, none of this would have happened. But certainly fucked this up because the people who were supposed to be taking care of this, that is the Claw, are not taking care of this, which is a problem. But Surly could still track Kalam from where he landed in Seven Cities as an outlaw all the way to Malaz City, and still he managed to reach there. What does that tell us? Is a question. I'm not going to be the one to answer. I think Nathan knows. Um, so, is it an amazing arc? Not really. It does drag a little, but I think, at least in hindsight, it pays the question like, why is he still alive? He shouldn't be alive. Yeah.
There you go, Matt. You just witnessed the Malazan encyclopedia at work.
Yeah, that was a really good explanation. That yeah, some questions that I didn't even think to ask. So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. When you asked that, I was like, oh yeah, why is he alive? Because I mean, I don't know if I ever fully questioned that, but sometimes I was like, how is he still alive? Like, what is he
Yeah.
doing? Like, why
I mean,
is
you're in
he?
his POV,
Yeah,
and
I'm
he
like,
thinks he's hot shit.
yeah, but
I
I'm
mean,
just like,
yeah.
why does he keep getting saved? There's a demon that saves him at one point. Then his somehow weird lover, Manala, comes in to save him. A dog saves him. So I'm like, I did think at one point, like I think it was last night, I was like, Yeah, no, he should be dead, but like somehow someone saved him. Like just,
Yeah.
oh no. I'm like, there must be a reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is narrative because that's what
Yeah,
happens
for
when
sure.
main
Yeah.
characters need to stay alive. But also to your point, Lee, about Kalam thinking that he's hot shit. He is hot shit because Topper goes, "Yeah, Dancer would
To be
hesitate
fair, he
before
is.
taking
Yeah,
him
yeah,
on."
for sure.
Yeah.
So I love that moment so much when Topper starts talking to Lucine through the corpse and she's like, "So call off the claw now." And he's like, sorry, can't do that. But I need him alive." And he's like, "Do you really expect the 20 assassins that are after him to actually win?" No.
Like the literal god of assassins would quite hesitate to
Yeah,
get in a fight with this
yeah,
guy. So like, I don't think you got to worry.
yeah.
We will see more of Kalam's badassery, but I love him just moving through the city, killing a guy by elbowing him in the back of the head, of all things, killing another guy by just swinging a bag full of tacks at his face. It's like how Kalam is not what you think of when you think assassin,
Yeah,
because he's
yeah.
I think he's like 6 foot tall and super muscular and just a brute, but he's also quick as hell and smart as hell, and he can creep up on anyone.
He's pretty cool. He's pretty cool.
Let's
Yeah.
see. Matt, do you have a favorite moment in Deadhouse Gates?
Oh, this is hard.
That's tough.
And you can just list off a few, because I don't think I could come up with one single
Yeah.
favorite.
I feel like some of my favorite moments were when it was like reveal of like lore and history of some things. So I think Ikariam's dad was a cool moment. Like it was kind of just like it wasn't fully necessary for the narrative, I think, in some aspects, but it was a really nice like exposition of, hey, this is Ikariam. This is what happened to him. Like this is why he can't remember anything. That one just comes to mind, I think, most just because we read it so recently. But I think as well, I really liked this is probably a little weird, but when Felicin had to climb the crystal or whatever, when they're trying to navigate the city, and the other two just kind of get up without any issues. She's like, "Wait, you're telling me I just cut myself on that rock to get up here, and you guys got up here with no issues?" I kind of like that because I think it was an interesting moment of her character development of kind of just like I think it maybe humbled her a little in some aspects of like you can rely on other people maybe is something I thought of, but could be a little off there.
I like that moment for a different reason.
Mhm.
I like it because she climbs up all the way, and then Culp has a thought like, "God damn, she is stronger than I will ever be." Or like, "She
Yeah.
is way tougher than I thought."
Yeah. No, I think that that
I like that
speaks to her as
moment because
well.
Gulp is a sassy bastard and just goes, "I'm surprised that those still have angles." That's what I like about that moment.
Yeah. No, it's a great moment, I think, and it really like speaks to a lot of different aspects of their characters. So, and I think just I don't know, this was such a cool battle that forget the name, but when they crossed over using the wagons as a an underwater bridge and then blew it all up,
Oh,
that was an amazing moment because all the sappers are like, we just used all of our ammunition.
Mhm,
This is such a sad day. And he's like, you would think they lost their mom or something using all what's that they've used all that. And I was like,
yeah.
I think it speaks to their character and kind of adds a little more to them, which I think is awesome. And then that was just like such a cool thing because yeah, it was one of those moments you're like, how are they gonna get across? Like, what's the plan? Like getting through 3 feet of water is not that hard. Like, I don't know, I've walked across a few rivers and it's the deeper it gets, the harder it is to move. And so I thought that was a really ingenious way of that battle, like winning that battle. So those are a few of my moments at least. Probably have some others, but those are the ones that I got off the top of my head.
I had a few. Um, I mean, to be honest, most times the first thing when I that I think of when I think about Deadhouse Gates is the fall of Coltane.
Yeah.
But this time, Squint really stuck out to me. About how he refuses to take the shot until I think it's Nether is just like pleading with him.
Yeah.
And then he gets a couple other mentions throughout the book of Blistig thinks like heroism combined with murder, like that would break anyone. And I just really hope that we don't find him face down in a ditch somewhere. So that really stuck out to me this time. I think as well, just the night of the uprising when we see Duerker and the Marines go through it, we see it happening in the camp in Skull Cup, and we just see everyone go through the horror of like an entire continent rising up against its oppressors. Duerker riding through the city and seeing all of the atrocities that were committed, and him thinking and knowing that this is going to scar me for the rest of my life, isn't it? And kind of his reflections on trauma and PTSD throughout the book really stuck out to me this time, because he's been through it before and he knows what's going to happen, and he's trying to help List find a way through that. That's really cool to me.
Yes, my turn. So I guess Nathan knows, but Matt, in case you don't know, one of my first calls to fame, um, especially in the Malazan subreddit, was I wrote a whole bunch of pieces about why Loleeeee is not actually terrible, and one of my main
Yes.
pieces of evidence was chapter 23 of Deadhouse Gates, which is one of my favorite scenes in the entire series. Because Kalam went like through crossed 3 continents, instigated one rebellion, killed a whole bunch of fools, crossed an entire ocean, went through a city, killed 15 claws, is currently bleeding out on the floor. And when he's asked, why did you do all this? He has like, yeah, why did I do all of this? And just the rapid fire answers of like, am I permitted a defense? Go ahead. And it just goes off like, yeah, oh, you've prepared for this. But of course she has. She knows you're here from the moment you landed on 7 cities. She knows you're coming. She knows why you're here. And Kalam turns the reader, usually from my experience, the reader doesn't buy into this. But looking back, it's really telling of the character of the Empress is, for reasons you'll discover later. But one of the quotes that have stuck with me since is she basically goes, I answered a need with anguish and despair. An empire is worth more than any mortal life. And then Kalam replies, as a fucking own or something, including you. And she's like, yeah, including me.
Yeah.
And it's
I brought that up in our episode that we recorded yesterday.
God. Other than that, I think Bowden's death got me, especially the second read.
Yes.
Because, especially armor can hide a child, especially a child. And that screwed me up. And of course, Duker's death, got me bawling for 10 minutes in the fucking shower. So there's that. Which is why I don't read the book again, because I'm not going through that again. So I guess it counts as my favorite scene, even though I hate it. Do with that information what you will.
Yeah, that's why I was a little hesitant to say the fall and some of the deaths were my favorites, because they're really impactful and amazing scenes. But I'm I don't know if I want to say they're my favorite, just because of how kind of gut wrenching they are a little bit, where you're reading it and you're just oh, this I grew really attached to them, and that's how it's gonna end for them. And so because none of the deaths in this book I feel like it explored the theme of war atrocities and terrible deaths really quite well, because everyone that died, it was never Bowden went up in flames literally, and then Duerker gets crucified up on some tree after watching everyone else die, a bunch of painful deaths.
Fun time.
And so I think that's I was a bit hesitant to say, because I do really think those are amazing scenes, but it's just because kind of how it hits you in the heart a little bit, where you're just oh, that's so sad. It's not what I wanted or what I expected. So
yeah, I think the only death that's kind of played lately in the book is because even all of the soldiers that die in the battles, there's always Duerker thinking about the list of the fallen and honor the dead and all of that. The only death that's played lightly, I think, is the bartenders the night of the uprising, where Gessler and Stormy and Truth have a tab at the bar, and then the bar, the whole building collapses on the bartender, and Stormy goes, well, I guess Hood paid up his tab.
God damn it, Stormy.
dark soldiers humor. But yeah, even Culp, things you're put off a little bit by the merchant that appears with 4 undead servants, but you're well, this might work out. And then Culp looks away from him for a second, and he's swarmed by rats and he's dead.
Yeah, just gross.
Yeah, no, Culp, I think Lauren, the prologue of Deadhouse Gates, and Culp's death are the first 3 instances where this is not going to be fair, is it? The characters I like are never going to have fun.
Nope.
Yeah, poor Culp, man.
Yeah. Because I mean, yeah, it was Culp was rats, Bowden was flames, Coltane was speared and then hit by an arrow. A lot of the soldiers were just killed in battle, but I mean, Duiker crucified, over 10,000 soldiers crucified. Like there's no easiness for anyone.
Yeah,
And then a lot of other people. Oh, then the nobleman got kicked in the throat. That's
yeah,
not a very pleasant death.
I was about to say there are two satisfying deaths in this book, and they come within 10 pages of each other. And it's when Duiker kills Nethpar by kicking him in the throat, and then like 10 pages later, Pormquell gets beheaded because Corvolo Dom is like, yeah, I'm not giving him the honor of dying with his soldiers. He doesn't deserve it. Which is a terrible thing to say. And I made the comment to Matt yesterday, like it's funny how fiction makes us treat death in like a
yeah,
certain way, and like, well,
yeah.
he got what he deserved, but
Yeah.
I mean, Pormquell is responsible for the deaths of literally thousands, so I don't feel too bad saying that he got what he deserved.
Yeah. I think it should have been the reverse though. Him pinned up on a tree, a slow, painful death, and everyone else just like a quick, like a little bit more merciful. But I mean, he wanted to make a point, I guess, and he's not a very pleasant dude, I guess. So
Yeah, I wouldn't say so.
yeah. He's not the kind of guy I would invite over for a night of board games.
I
He would
wouldn't
not
probably
be on that
able to.
group chat.
Yeah. One sec.
Just
Right, who got
talking
what? Who
about
deserved? Yeah, yeah.
Pormquell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy.
I think it's about time we give an obligatory fuck Malacrel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He is the worst. I mentioned this last night in I was like, he's the kind of guy I'm like, Corvolo Dom, you hate him, but it's because he's like meant to be hated, like he's a bad dude. But Malik Rel, he's the kind of guy that I just despise.
Yeah.
Like just the worst because it's the slimy like cowardice I feel like they show and just like the two-sided like two-faced stuff. I'm just like, wow, if you're gonna do anything, at least do it with like a little more honesty. Because yeah, Corvallo Dom over here is like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm the leader of this rebellion. I'm a renegade fist. Everyone's gonna die how I'm gonna say they're gonna die. And this other guy's over here is like, I tricked you. You know, you're not actually gonna fight these guys. And I'm like, you're just the worst. I hate guys like you.
I think one thing with Malik in Deadhouse Gates especially is that the way he speaks, like you have Krupp who speaks in a very idiosyncratic way, and he can be a bit grating at times, but he's mostly meant to be empathetic, you know?
Yeah.
Like Malik in this book speaks like Yoda on steroids or ketamine or something like that. The guy is just annoying. Like even the way he speaks is annoying.
Yep.
Despicable. He oozes slime in this book, which
Oh,
is very well writing. It's very good writing. It's very annoying though.
Yeah, to the point where his teeth are like stained green
Yeah,
or
God,
something
what
like
the
that.
fuck is that?
And
Come on.
it's like he's a normal human. Why are his teeth stained green?
Because he is
And-
slime. It's just like part of him now.
I mean,
He's
that's
he's
fair.
of the Warren of
yeah.
slime.
I never actually thought of that. That's actually a very good point. Yeah.
This isn't perfect, but a good way to describe Malik Rel is my favorite line from Toy Story. You are a sad, strange little man.
That's
Nice.
accurate.
Without the
Yeah.
second part, which is "and you have my pity," because Malik Rel does not have my pity.
Yeah.
Nope.
Fuck that guy.
Not at all. He's the
Hmm.
worst.
I think
Point.
one of the other themes of our episodes throughout Deadhouse Gates has been Matt slowly learning more and more about Warrens, but at the same time becoming more and more confused about Warrens. Every time we learn something new about Warrens, Matt is like, "What?"
I was like, why is that a thing? It didn't follow any rules I knew before. Ugh. They even shared me the one meme. What
Oh
was
yeah,
it? The invincible meme of so when do we get to learn about Warrens? That's the neat part. You don't. I was like, yeah.
I mean,
which, strictly speaking, isn't true. You'll get a couple explanations, but
Yeah.
the most concise explanation is like a few pages in book 5.
Yep.
That's the most I can do.
It better be good. I'm hoping they're good. I don't imagine I'll have all the answers. I need.
yeah, no. just embrace the lack of knowing.
I'm
And
slowly trying to, but part of me just like refuses to give up on like, I need to understand this. I want to know how this works. Because part of me is like, now what if I was in this world? I want to be like the Warren Master. I want to know how these work. And so that's why I keep thinking of it.
Yeah.
Bugging me. I don't know why. But
I think by the next book, you'll probably have a fairly decent grasp on how they work overall. Like, not that necessarily the intricacies of how everything works, but you can tell this guy has this warren and thus he does this. And he does this because his power is somewhat like this. Like you have Culp, who is a shadow. He has Manos, right? Or I guess the boat warren, the boat repair warren. Um, so he's in way above his head, and he's like, okay, but I can't trick reality. That's not what I do. Like that's not a thing. I can't do that. But then he just wills it to happen. And he thinks, oh, I'm doing this. I'm doing like it's just a dragon passes through, and like, oh, hang on, I'm not the one that's doing this. It's that.
yeah.
Which, yeah, by memories of ice, you have a much more concise understanding of, that Warren does this specific thing, and it is capable of such things because X, Y, Z. It's not written like in stone. It's not written in stone. Like this is exactly what this Warren does, but for the most part, there is some measure of correlation between what Warren that is. So like Manus, which Warren of Shadow has shadow powers. No duh. What does that mean? More, correlation or before beyond he opens a hole in reality and then a whole ship vanishes through that somehow. No, it's more causal, I guess, than that. Which is nice. It's not that it makes sense, but at the very least, you can tell why this happens. Not how, but why. Which I think is very important with such magic systems, because you're pretty much never gonna know how. But why, by next book, you should have a fairly good grasp.
Yeah.
I think, and maybe this is putting words in your mouth, Matt, but I think lots of Matt's confusion came with like, yeah, so the Warrens are infested with shapeshifters, so we're going to use earth spirits instead. And Matt was like, so what does that mean? And there were a few other things where we learned things about Warrens, and it
like the Tremolor was one.
Oh yeah, there's a piece of a Warren that's been
There's a
nailed
piece
down
of a
by an
Warren.
Azath house.
Part of me is just like, this feels like a Greek god thing where it's like, I'm going to worship this one and I'm going to worship this one and I'm going to get this power, but like, it's still kind of weird.
That's honestly somewhat fair, yeah.
But it's a loose connection I was thinking of. I was like, maybe that's one way you could describe it, but not. But yeah, no, because like the book, it would be like, yeah, no, I have this one. Like I can do, I can, kind of trick people using different images, throwing voices and stuff like that, or like making fire appear that isn't real. I'm like, okay, so like that makes sense. And then like we'll get to another war or like we'll get to Tremor and it's like, oh, this is a piece of a war and this one's broken and all this. And I'm like, you can break a warren? Since when? I thought it was just like a place or like, just like some place of power. And I was like, oh,
I remember what got you the most confused is when they go into the place with the Solanda and the Tulan Imas appear and they're like, yeah, so this is Curled Emerlon, the Elder Warren of Shadow, the Warren that you use, Culp, and they call it Mayanus Rashawn. They call it the name of two different Warrens that exist, and they're like, yeah, your Warren is the child of this Warren.
oh yeah. I was like, since when was this a thing? I was like, so we got Warren spawning other Warrens? I was like, this is like paint. You're just mixing colors now.
Yeah, kinda.
But
Oddly apt comparison.
like this is like so is a Warren a person, a place, a thing? So just having it's like this Warren's like, hey, I'm married to this Warren. We had a few kids, and this is kind of their magical powers now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm like, I'm not getting a good explanation here. I'm getting more and more confused. It's kind of fun,
The
but
Warren, the Warrens are the friends we made along the way.
yeah.
I was going to say the Warrens are a human construct like time.
God, like, it's confusing because in a way they are in like the way that people understand them and talk about them. Yes, but they're more fundamental to the world than that.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
There is an Elder Shadow Warren, but what you call that doesn't matter to the Warren itself.
Yeah. The Warren's like, yeah, sure, you can give me that name. It's like it's fine.
I suppose another way to view it is like through sets. So the Elder Warrens are like supersets, so they contain the newer warrens. So because people can't access the larger warren, they call that the child warren, I guess would be able to describe it. The point is, it's all convention because mages within the world also don't understand the metaphysics of how it works. So they're kind of figuring it out along the way.
Yeah.
And those that do know aren't talking because they're assholes.
I feel like Quickpen's one of them.
Yes.
Yes, he is.
I'm like, that's one character through the past two books. I'm like, why can we just get like just a few pages in his head of him like walking through like, all right, I'm gonna do this to do this, and I'm gonna do this to do this.
It's coming in the next book.
Yeah, next book has all of that. Yeah.
Yes,
Next book,
finally.
Next book has, yeah. You will, I think you will really appreciate, because the beginning of Memories of Ice, I remember, gives you so much info. You're gonna enjoy it.
I have a field day. I'm excited.
In a manner of speaking, yeah.
In a manner of speaking, but I remember getting there my first time through and being like, I feel like I'm getting like information and exposition. Like this is I didn't get that through the first two books really. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to Memories of Ice. It's definitely in my top 3 of the series.
I'm excited for it. Is it one of your favorites, Lee? I know you.
My first read, it was like number 1 until I got to the Bone Hunters. Like it was probably around top 3. Yeah. Now it's fallen a little because certain characters which I like in Deadhouse Gates and certain themes that I like in Deadhouse Gates are not present in Memories of Ice. It explores different things, and there's some aspects of the book which I just don't like. However, one thing it has going for it is it's by far, and I think is by far the most conventional fantasy novel among all 10.
Yes.
It's pretty straightforward. Like these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. Like
Gotcha.
there's no grayness here because one side is so much worse than the other that you can't just say like, oh yeah, maybe they're the good guy. No, there's no. So it works for me. It's nice. It's simple, and you can afford to look at like how the world works. It also has some of the most epic shit in the books. You know, like yeah. So there's that. It's a great book.
That's exciting.
I think it usually ranks either like top 1 or top 2, at most top 3 across the entire thing. I think it's top 2 in the most recent survey.
I think so.
It's a very good book. A lot of people like it.
Cool. Yeah, because I think that's one thing I've actually really appreciated about this series, though, is the vagueness of who's good and who's bad. Because I'm like, it feels more like a telling of some real history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I like. So that'll be interesting. They're like the one legit bad guys in history where you're like, okay, yeah, no, they were bad. World consensus, they were bad.
Yeah. Well, even like in Gardens of the Moon, you get Lorne and she meets Tool, and Tool's like, oh yeah, the Jagu so bad. Like they were so evil. We had to lock Race away. And Race is like this terrible tyrant, like devil god that you're talking about for the whole book. And then you get to Deadhouse Gates and Liz starts having visions of the Jagged, and he's like, yeah, so the Talon Imas broke every bone in this 5-year-old boy's body and pinned him underneath this stone for eternity. And the Jagged tried to reason with the Talon Imas multiple times, and they just would not listen. And then you're like, oh, maybe even that's as more complicated than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, what, 200 millennia or whatever they're saying can add a little bit of some gray area and a little bit of some oversimplification of the story.
Yeah, I think especially the next book's prologue will certainly resonate with that.
Yes.
Getting ahead of myself. I should not spoil things.
I mean,
you're just hyping it up. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're about to read it in the next week and a half.
Yeah.
So
I don't know, was there any like favorite overarching themes you guys had from Deadhouse Gates? Like I feel like we've talked about them, but
so I feel like I cannot talk about Deadhouse Gates without talking about Children Are Dying.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost hesitate when I say it out louder on the subreddit that it's like maybe my second favorite quote of the series, because it's maybe the second most quoted thing in the entire series. But it just hits so hard, and it makes me think every time I read it. It makes me think about whatever atrocities are going on in the world at the time. So I think that's one of my favorite. I think it carries through Deadhouse Gates, and then it continues on for the rest of the series as well.
Mm-hmm.
But also Dewarker's reflections on the Fallen, and how at one point he's like, don't don't forget about the living because you're too busy grieving the dead, or don't reflect too much on why did he die and not her, and things like that. I just really like all of the thoughts that we get throughout the book of what it's like to be a soldier in the midst of this, and how you have to find a way to hold on to your humanity. And Duiker does that by walking through the medical train any chance he gets, and remembering like this struggle against death, this is everything taken away, laid bare, just us fighting against Hood. I really like all of that stuff.
That's a very difficult question to answer because Nathan just took both of the most obvious ones. Ah, well.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
So, God. I mean, one of the more prominent questions, which I think the book doesn't even take a stance on, which I'll get to why in a moment, is the rebellion justified? Now, the book doesn't concern itself at all with that because the book itself takes a very humanistic approach to this. You know, the children are dying quote. It doesn't matter whose children it is, they're dying. Who cares? But I think it's one of the more interesting approaches to imperialism because the Malazans are colonists. They're here as conquerors, and they have brought settlers to essentially assimilate different cultures. And those that do assimilate, cool, they get to be neat. Others aren't so lucky. And then you have a guy who's a Napan, and then you have a Malazan girl, and some Falari Gistel prick essentially orchestrating the entire rebellion, who have absolutely nothing to do with any sort of national struggle against oppression. They're pushing their own agenda. You know, Felicin has a thing against the war, Corval is an idiot, Malik's a power-hungry prick, and so on. And another question is, if it is justified, then at what point do the atrocities cancel out the justifications? And for my money, again, the series, if it takes a stand, it's like, we're way past that point. Like, any justification they may have had with what they've done, it's all gone. And then, in effect, it's one of my most memorable things is how different characters view the rebellion, at least from like the defending side, the Malazan side, right? You have Fiddler and Kalam, where like none of this would have happened in a killing bed. None of this. None of it. He would have just nipped it in the bud. It would have been done and dusted in 2 weeks. Instead, here we are with a big army marching across an entire continent, and now we have to put this whole thing down. You have Duiker, who has similar thoughts because, well, he was a member of the Old Guard, right? He was there with the Emperor. He was his personal historian. He learned how to write and read along with, at his behest. And then you have Bolt and Coltane, who are like, well, the short-haired woman does not understand Wiccan ways, but the Empire honors its debts. The Empire does what it does. Dancer and Kellanved were able conquerors, but were they able rulers? And Duiker gets pissed at that because, like, I don't fucking care. They were my friends. Which, yeah, they were. And she murdered them. Well, kind of. But the overarching picture of how could these groups coexist, or is the rebellion justified? If it is justified, do the atrocities cease the justification? And how does the book approach this? Well, Nathan already went into how the book approaches this with the children are dying quote, which encapsulates the whole thing. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't care who is justified. I don't care why you're doing this. Innocents are paying in blood, and that's what matters because ultimately, who needs, pages of history and economics and all that shit when children are dying? So, yeah, it's a powerful book, and I think I haven't even gotten to listen, which there's a whole lot more log there, but I'm going to talk for like 3 hours more, so I'd rather not. And I would rather leave something for Matt to say because, yeah, we've kind of hoarded all the themes here. So, Matt, what have you?
You guys put so eloquently. That's it. I don't have anything else.
No notes.
But no, I had some of the same thoughts of at the end of the book when he's like, and we're just gonna kill 10,000 of these soldiers in like a really horrible, painful way. I thought, so you are rebelling against them. You're just trying to get them out because you want your homeland back without an external power controlling you, right? And so I just thought, I was like, is that really justified in that sense of like killing all 10,000 of them like that and like pursuing this train of like innocent people more or less? Like they've just been living there. Like they were told by their empire, like, hey, you're gonna go live here. And like for the past, I don't know how long this has been seven cities has
It's
been conquered.
been like a few decades.
A few decades. Yeah. So like some of them have grown up. This is where their whole life is. Like I think like that quote of the children are dying is like just it hits a nail on the head because it's like these children, they may be Malazan, they may be this, but they were born and raised there. This is all they know. Is the world they were brought into. And so I think the book really it asks those questions and then leaves it as an open-ended like now it's up to you to decide, which I feel like is a great way Erickson did it because like as a historian, that's how history is. It's like we go back and analyze and we're like, all right, is this what do we think of this of these decisions? And I think it also like points out like the sense of like anger and rage and like the effect that can push and take people. And I think Ikariam's like the flagship idea of that, where it's like in a rage he can destroy level of civilization essentially. Like he's super powerful, but I think it's brought back and actually shown through the rage and like kind of like mindless slaughter of the rebellion of them just like they're angry, they just want to fight, they're just looking to get out there and do as much damage as they can, and it's their rage that causes like so many deaths and so many just horrible atrocities. I think the book is really interesting in terms of like asking a lot of those questions like you've mentioned and then just being like now it's your decision. What do you think? Like, is this justified? Is this the real thing? And then I think some of the smaller story arcs of like Fellison was an interesting like exploration of like basically prostitution for a little bit and then like how she's going to deal with those effects afterwards, like drugs and prostitution, and then how is she going to deal with that and cope with that as she's trying to survive. Is it like going to make her and change her into do something great, or is it just she's going to be like lose herself completely? And so I think it explores some themes like that really well, which I thought was really interesting to read. But,
Yeah, I think like going back to the children are dying quote, you have that moment of Kalam in front of the encampment where they've just staked all of the children out, and Kalam's biggest feeling is I'm helpless right now, and I hate feeling that way.
Yeah.
And it kind of reflects how a lot of us feel in the real world. And then of course you have Apt who saves one, and Shadow Throne. To be fair, it is an act of compassion. Shadow Throne saves all of the kids. He does it for his own reasons because he's like, oh, I can use these kids for something. I'll find a way. But Apt, to be fair, has kind of grown a connection to Kalam and is like, well, Kalam wanted to save these kids, so I'm gonna try to do that for him. And then you have that moment of Cotillion appearing in the Shadow Warren with Panic and Apt, and just him, Panic as a child would, feeling like he was punished because he didn't stay close to his dad, and Cotillion being like, no, it is not your fault. It's not your dad's fault. He did everything he could. This is the act of some evil people. And he gets a little emotional at one point and says to Apt, like, part of the reason I ascended was so that I could escape these horrible feelings of humanity.
The change of feeling, yes.
But I want to thank you for the reminder. And that's just a really beautiful moment of, you know, if the god of assassins is being like, okay, this is too much, guys. Like maybe it's time to take a closer look at everything.
that whole scene with the children and then Shadow Throne saving them, I was like we read that so long ago that I kind of forgot about it a little bit, but thinking back, I was like, oh yeah, that was another one of those terrible ones where I was just like, they're kids. Like this is what you're doing to them. And so when Shadow Throne saved him, I was like, hey, he's not too bad. I mean, he always seemed a little skeptical or a little sketchy to me, but I mean, he at least cares about the kids. So yeah. There's a Manal and Kalam weird love arcs.
I don't hate it.
I don't hate it.
I like it.
I think it's fun and I enjoy it, but I just think it's funny just how it all happens because I'm like, that feels like two strong-headed people are just like, for some reason, like, I'm attracted to this. And it just like plays out, which I think is funny, but
I think I almost feel like a theme of this book is people not being who you thought they were, whether it's Bowden turning out to be a Talon who was sent to protect Fellison, and then he was just a real asshole at some points. But him turning out to be who he was, I had another one. I had another example, and I can't remember
mean,
for the life of
yeah,
me what
that's
it
like
is.
what you basically said is what Bowden says to Felicity when he dies. You were not who I thought you were. And
Yeah,
he just
you
dies.
aren't who I thought you were. Felicin
That's
turns out
that.
to be stronger than I think Heberick and Bowden thought that she was.
Hmm.
Um, by the end of the book, I almost feel like Heberick admires Felicin a little bit. Just maybe that's
Hmm.
not the right way to put it, but he's surprised by her, and she constantly takes him aback with how much she understands and how like some of the wisdom that she's gained through her trauma. He's like, oh, maybe we do understand each other a little bit. What was you have Salkalon turning out to be Pearl, of course, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's an
Yeah.
obvious one. Lysine turning out to not be the evil empress that Kalam thought she was this whole
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. Which is really cool. I mean, I can't go on just the comics that has Gates, but the stark transformation of like how you view a character based on their perspective from every motherfucker and their mother hates listening Daughters of the Moon because you have Lauren, who the only person who's like vaguely sympathetic to her is brainwashed to like an extreme degree, and then you have like
Yes.
in Deadhouse Gates, pretty much every POV dislikes her. And the few people that offer counterpoints are shut down because people get emotional. That's fair. And then like Kalam comes up and like I, I was chasing a ghost through 3 continents. I did all of this. Turns out it was just a mortal woman. Yeah.
Well, and
And the
even
same is true of
oh,
like,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. No, like we brought up Felicin, we brought about it, brought up Salgalon, but characters differ a lot based on how you perceive them. And I don't remember if we get Herboric's perspective on Felicin at the end of the book. I don't believe so.
No, I
I
think
don't
it's
remember.
I think we get Heberick's perspective like twice, once in the
Because I
prologue and once at
remember,
the end.
yeah, I remember he goes, I want to come home to Fenner at the end of this book.
Yes.
I don't remember if he thinks about Felicin in that POV.
I don't
I
think
don't
Um,
think
so.
so.
fuck. Well, um, but yeah, I mean, god damn it. Well, I blew that, didn't I? Well, there
Uh,
goes my paradigm.
what I was gonna bring up as far as Lysine goes is even in that very first meeting, in the very first command meeting in Hisar, Bolt brings up the possibility to do work like, do you think Lysine is lonely because maybe she felt like she had to take over the empire from Kellenvet and Dancer, and as part of that she had to get rid of people that were her friends. Do you think maybe that's had an effect on how she views the world, and like maybe she's lonely? And Joker's like, nah. He thinks about it for a second and is like, no. Nah, I choose to hate her anyways.
Uh,
I
right, yeah.
mean, it's easy to hate governmental leaders, especially of a conquering empire. And I think the worst of them.
Going along with this theme of when Coltane first gets to Hisar, you've got all of the command being like this savage horse warrior. He doesn't understand politics or the situation here. What's he gonna do?
Mhm.
Like he's just some backwater fist that Lysine sent because he's her only option. And then they slowly start to be like, oh, yeah, Coltane is like the best. Now, do I
Yes.
think he's as good of a general as Dujek? Maybe not, but
I mean,
but I don't know. We don't see a
he
lot. We haven't seen a lot of Dujek generaling yet.
Mhm.
no, not yet. But Dujek
I
has
think
like years of
mhm.
experience, so maybe the differentiator.
I think it's a bit unfair. Well, I guess unfair is not the right word because Coltane's strategy is picked out for him
That's
beforehand, right? He
fair.
only
That's
has
fair.
one thing to do, and that is run the fuck away through a very predetermined route because he can't go anywhere else. So everything else just falls to tactics, and he just it's masterful. If you have Sakala Crossing, with the Matt brought up when they blow up the bridge, you have Gallow Ridge, where they sacrifice a horse to make their what should have been light cavalry into heavy lancers, which is just what like if you have seen or heard of any horse cultures, they are either one or the other. You don't usually get both. You don't use unless like chivalry Europe or something, but then you wouldn't have light cavalry in the sense of the Wiccans. You would
Yeah.
have a more like support role. And Dubiker like expands on it. Like, do you know how to wheel? Do you know how to write information? Do you know how to charge? Do you know how to do all of this? This is an uphill charge well, you're wearing heavy armor with horses that haven't been trained for this. You're gonna die. And the fact that they don't die is impressive enough. And Vathor Crossing, Vathor is even like when it's a complete disaster because Nathbar is an idiot. Yeah, let's not go there. And Torma dies. Even then, it's like the Wiccans charge with like what 1,000 men that turns the tide and allows the refugees to escape. Like from there on, throughout, he runs out of tactics because at some point they just run out of rations, so they have nothing more that they can do. It's just grueling man-to-man fighting, and even then they still manage to get there. So he's not so much a general as he is a warrior, and he is a goddamn good warrior.
That's true. Maybe in the style of Marvel's What If, maybe that's mine for Deadhouse Gates, is what if Coltaine got to Seven Cities earlier and was able to run the campaign against
Mm-hmm.
the rebellion? What would that look like?
It would be a pretty cool fight. I'll tell you
I
that
think
much.
I think Duerker thinks at one point, like, it's near the very beginning of the Chain of Dogs when he still has the vast majority of his soldiers, but I think Duerker thinks at one point, like, I think if Coltaine like left the refugees behind, he could probably end this rebellion pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But Coltaine is too full of honor to leave innocents behind.
Yeah.
Right. That's something we didn't even bring up. I should have thought about it, but yeah, it's another one of those questions. Like, why does he just leave the refugees? Because he has what 5,000 Wiccans, 5,000 of the seventh. Reasonably speaking, he can siege a single coastal city, get reinforcements, get to Aaron, beat the shit out of the entire rebellion. But he doesn't want to do that because that's not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And just, I don't know, man. Like, I could just sit here and fanboy over Colting for 20 minutes, but I think we've done so enough already.
Yeah, we have.
Is there anything else you guys want to talk about? Because I have a few things, but it's like tangentially related to the books.
Yeah, I think one of the other things I wanted to bring up, and this is one of the last things that I have, is and we just talked about this last night when we recorded our final episode, but I love how, okay, two things. One, I love how seamlessly Erickson weaves between the humor and horror. Like we get like Duerker is super depressed, and he and Lowell, I think, have this beautiful conversation about dealing with trauma and how the way to deal with it is sleight of hand. And if you can find yourself laughing and crying in the same moment, that's how you know. And then we get the scene with the sappers where Coltaine demotes the sapper, and it doesn't feel out of place that they're all like fighting to keep from cracking up laughing. And Lowell looks over to Duerker and says, sleight of hand.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I really appreciated. And then just how Erickson poignantly like puts a period on these terrible moments of atrocity with like small acts of compassion. Like Mappo and Akarium are there at Aaron Way seeing all the bodies, and Mappo's like, you know what? I'm gonna save these dogs that somehow survived the fall of Coltaine because it means a lot to the soldiers that he met, to Gessler and Stormy, and especially Truth. And then he wakes up Akarium, and Akarium is like, Mappo says, I'm sorry I couldn't heal you more. I used my last elixirs on 2 dogs. And Akarium doesn't resent it at all. He's like, they must have been good dogs. So just moments like that, like it almost like it, I don't want to say like, how do I want to phrase it? It like puts a fine point on like, like the biggest acts of evil can be balanced by like small acts of compassion and good.
Yeah. Anyone else? Should I geek out? Yeah.
Unless Matt has anything, I say go ahead.
I don't have anything. You're good to go.
Right. So we brought this up a bit earlier, but so a bit of a trivia question, I guess, is the explicit basis of the Chain of Dogs has been the British retreat from Kabul, which, unlike the Chain of Dogs, which lasted 6 months and covered a whole continent, was about half the country and ended in slaughter in about 11 days. But one thing I couldn't help but notice is the constant, well, not constant, but the alludements to the Roman Empire. Like, especially, one thing I thought of a lot is like Vercingetorix in Gaul and Boudica in Britain. So Vercingetorix was like the leader of the Gauls, of basically the last single united Gallic resistance movement. He was Caesar's greatest opponent in the Gallic Wars, and inevitably he was handily defeated. There was no big retreat from the area, but he gave them the run for their money for years. And he also, because the Gauls weren't particularly on friendly terms with the Romans, who were settling on their lands, atrocities occurred. Britain was even more so because because there was one army. It's oddly similar, which is why I can't help but think like there must have been some inspiration. So, without getting into too much detail, Boudica was elected like the tribe queen of a united, Picts. It would be Picts now. Well, whatever. A united English, Proto-English, whatever the tribe was. I can't remember what it was. Army, which basically ransacked the living shit out of Roman Britain. And there was one army to speak of under General Paulinius. I don't remember, something like that. And nearby, there was stationed another relatively large army in a garrison, which, when messaged, refused to actually depart. They sent like 200 slaves to put down like some minor revolt, and they got absolutely slaughtered, by the way. Boudica's rebellion was particularly remembered because of its romanticization by later historians like Cassius Dio, who does have a very interesting penchant for building things up. And the way he describes the atrocities of the Brits is like bordering on comical. They were terrible. Like, I don't want to understate just how awful the things that Boudica and her Britons did to the Roman settlers. But the way he describes it, like Cassius Dio describes, is like, dude. And ultimately, the way the campaign ended was they were chased all the way up to North Yorkshire or around there. And the alternative was either to stop and turn or go into Scotland where they would be killed anyway. And so they reached the scene like, okay, well, I guess we're fucked. I guess we're going to die here. So they turn and they make their stand. And, well, unlike Colton in the 7th, they actually do win, which is nice. But it's very similar because, again, the way it's built up in the future histories, right? Not necessarily in the moment, but it's very flowery, very romanticized. Like, Paulinus gives this big speech about, I don't remember what the speech is about. I'm sure people can find if they like, but I wonder how different things would be if like a historian that actually lived through these events would give a truthful representation of how they were. Because both Cassius that wrote about this, and I think Tacitus was the other guy that wrote about it, like lived 100, 200 years after the fact. And I'm very curious as to how different these events would be portrayed if they were portrayed through a contemporary historian like Duiker, which is why I'm quite partial to Duiker's perspective because of that specific thing. You get an honest portrayal of their atrocities on both sides because there's a lot of fucking bodies on Hisar's barracks. And
yes,
it wasn't pretty. So, yeah, ultimately, lots of different historical allegories and parallels from the Chain of Dogs and the Malazan Empire, which I think is a very interesting point to discuss, especially in the future as the books go on. So, I feel like since Matt's like mentioned historians a few times, I figured maybe I would bring this up. So if you guys have any thoughts, I'd be glad to hear.
I think you're like wondering about what if there was like a contemporary historian that lived through it. I mean, we see that. That's why Coltaine gives Duiker the vial, right?
Yeah,
because he
exactly.
says, you're more important than me. This story needs to be told. And we even see, like, minutes after they've gotten to Erin, Pormqual is blaming the death of all of the refugees that died on Coltaine and, like, trying to turn him into... He and Malacrel are already trying to turn Coltaine into the bad guy. And it's going through the ranks, and Blistig says, yeah, it's troubling some people, even though they just witnessed the fall of Coltaine and what he did for the refugees. And that's just, history is malleable, and the victor writes history, and we can never be absolutely sure that what we think happened in history actually did happen that way. Just because language and words are fucked up and change with every generation, and stories get passed down and don't stay the same.
Yeah. And that's why I really think Duiker was such a cool part, because he brought in like that kind of trained eye on it, like where he's noticing certain things and past experiences. Because I do think if Duiker didn't survive, or like wasn't able to like find a way to try and help preserve what actually happened, you'd get Pormqual and Alcrow being like, hey, no, Coltane is actually the bad guy, and then that would be the changed perspective on the history, and then people be looking back at like Coltane wasn't a great guy and things like that, and like the chain of dogs was like just a accident that happened that didn't need to happen, and it would have altered a lot of ways that would have been viewed. And so I think that's why I did appreciate Duiker so much, is because he tries to keep the facts straight and be like, no, this is what happened, and then leave it for interpretation. And I think that's what we should look at history as, is just like the way kind of this book has presented is like, here's what actually happened. Like it, like at the time, this is kind of what happened. This is the decisions that were made. Not all of them are probably going to agree with your viewpoints now and like how you view the world, but at least we know like Duiker, with him writing it or like telling it in this aspect, it's how I say it, it's a perspective of just trying to get the facts across and like and just comment on like, and then his comments are more just like, yeah, no, there's a lot of atrocities that happened that didn't need to happen, I guess. So
Yeah.
But I do appreciate the cool notes on the history there. I'm not too familiar with a lot of world history and some of those aspects, which I've been trying to rectify the past little bit, reading on a little more histories of other
Very nice.
areas, because Malazan has inspired me, because I'm like, man, I really don't know a lot about some of the history out there. So now some cool things to learn.
Yeah. Part of
Very
that
much.
is where we live, and all the history we get is America. So
Yeah. I don't have much else. I don't know if you guys have
I
anything,
believe
but
we've pretty much exhausted the whole thing. Yeah, I think
yeah.
in conjunction with what you guys have been talking about all this time throughout the book, I don't have any more notes. I think I came a bit underprepared, but yeah, it's
I
been a
mean,
blast for sure.
yeah, I did. I came pretty unprepared too. I just wanted it to just have a normal conversation without a ton of super prepared. Like, let's get to
Yeah,
these bullet points about Deadhouse Gates.
yeah.
Let me pull up my PowerPoint on Deadhouse Gates. We're going to discuss each of the key points. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how we can do like 8 hour and something episodes on a few chapters, and then we talk about the book as a whole, and it's like, well, then we're talking about the book as a whole, and then it still goes for about an hour and something.
I
No,
got none. Nope.
Yeah, we're good enough.
yeah. Well, I guess if we have nothing else, just thank you again, Lee, for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
It was a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
We'll
I hope,
we'll have to have both you and Maura on at the same point at some
hopefully.
time. Maybe when we finish Memories of Ice or some point like that.
Yeah.
So I just really like having these discussions about the book as a whole, because when you're in the nitty gritty of the chapters, sometimes it's hard to pull back and see how it all
Yeah,
overviews
sure.
and connects. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you once again for coming on. And listeners, I guess we'll see you next week with Memories of Ice.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and enjoy Memories of Ice. It's a great book.
Thank
See
you.
you then.
Thanks for joining us. It was a lot of fun.